Hi, everybody. First, round of applause for the amazing writing staff that showed up and Rex for acting. Wasn't that just a great episode? So now we're going to do a little talk back with the writers, creator, Nahnatchka Khan. The amazing Oscar Chow, Rex Lee. And Dilo, who's a comedian. And performance artist Erin O'Brien. Great. So first of all, I thought we'd start out by asking Nahnatchka the inspiration for this episode. I know you've had gay characters before. Is this something that we're going to see a lot more on the show, or is this a one-time thing? Could Oscar come back?
I mean, I would love it. If we got a season 2, absolutely. We just need to get more episodes. Yeah, no, we knew that we wanted, we had a reference to Oscar in the pilot that we wound up having to cut for time, and we thought it was funny, the writers and I, as we sort of developed the season, that like, this would be Jessica's blind spot, that she couldn't tell. And it started out with being only her ex-boyfriend was gay and she didn't know. And then we were like, oh, it would be funny if she just couldn't tell her gaydar was broken. Yeah. So we set it up in an earlier episode where she sells a house to a gay couple that she thinks are 2 best friends. And then, so we knew we wanted to set the scene for Oscar's visit.
Oh, so it's interesting. It's something that you guys knew all the way from the beginning when you were creating the character.
I mean, we knew of Oscar Chow, the character, her ex-boyfriend who was gay, and she had no idea. And then it, developed from there to like just a huge blind spot for her.
Oh, cool. And then Rex, how did you get involved with this episode?
Okay, well, way back in time, I was reading the trades, and I was so proud that Fresh Off the Boat was going to exist, and I've known Randall for years, so I was happy for him. And the show that I was on before the show I'm on now was Suburgatory, and the pilot of that was shot the same year as the pilot of Don't Trust the Bitch in Apartment 23, so of course I knew who Nahnatchka was. And so I just, I was so happy the show was existing in a universe. And then my people came to me and they said, Fresh Off the Boat wants you to read this episode, and if you like it, you can be in it. And I said, well, I'm probably gonna like it, so send it over. And I did like it. It was funny as hell, so that's how I ended up.
Any favorite stories of being on set? Okay.
I would just want to say that he was the only one that we went to. Like, we knew we wanted Rex.
Any funny stories to share on set?
Randall was sick the whole time, so I just sort of, left him alone a lot, and we talked, just sort of reminisced about how long we've been in town and stuff that's happened. I don't know. And my favorite memories of shooting the episode are the kids. They're so precocious and sweet and wonderful, and all day they've been tweeting me. Ian and Forrester have just been tweeting all day, and I'm like, those kids know how to work this social media thing in a way that I do not. I'm just so impressed by them.
The kids are great, but I have to say, you do have good taste in men. Lewis is kind of a cutie. In terms of the show itself, overall, we were talking earlier to Erin, and she mentioned that she actually has a theory about the gay subtext of the show. So I
think everything has a gay subtext. I'm a professional gay.
Please share, Professor.
Well, there was an episode that, I don't remember exactly which episode it was, but Jessica's character kind of rejects the performing the suburban housewife thing and sends Evan off to kind of dish with the local ladies, right? So he's literally having tea, which is kind of a queer subtext for give me the gossip, right? So he's having tea with the neighbors, and you've got Jessica who's like, I'm not doing that. I would not perform this heteronormative white thing that you people do in suburbia. And then Emery's totally poly. He's like, I got 2 girlfriends. It's cool. We all know everybody's okay with it. We're all good, right? So it's this whole this completely queering, to queer in the verb, not queer in the glitter way, but to queer this understanding of the dominant paradigm, right? It's this show itself actually queers everything we know about the world.
Nahnatchka, you have a response?
I mean, it's like you were in the writer's room. about the Queens of Orlando in that episode too. I was like, what? That's right, the Miata Queens of Orlando. Yes, exactly, the Miata Queens of Orlando. That's it.
As you can tell, there's a great community support for the show. It really has struck a chord with a lot of people. Quickly switching though, Hilo is actually an actor who's performed on the show Looking, and we were talking a little bit earlier about that show, which is, unfortunately just, got canceled by HBO, and
It's because it was so white.
well, it brings up an interesting point of how do you choose shows to support, in terms of a community.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was saying earlier that I love this show and I've been telling everybody to watch this show. And to me, it almost feels like, I'm not saying that being Asian equals queer, but what I'm saying is that Erin says that all the time. But what I am saying is that, there's something to be said about seeing, I'm not East Asian, but there's something to be said about the family that reflects me, right? And so, and I think the writing is superb. And so I'm always telling people to see that in the same way that I'm telling people to see Orange is the New Black, because of the representation that is there, the diverse trans and women cast, right? And I was on Looking and I was on Transparent, both very, very, very white, and in Transparent's case, Jewish shows. And it's not like when I think back, I wasn't going around saying, oh yeah, you should see it. I loved both the shows, but it wasn't like I was saying go and see this shit, because I feel like those stories have been played out, not played out, but you know what I'm saying. Everybody here knows what I'm saying. But so I'm just really, I feel jazzed when I see, people of color on the screen, and particularly queer people of color. And this is my favorite episode. It's so great, and you got to really see the kids being masterminds in this one. But yeah, anyway.
Yeah, the show's really jelly.
Yes.
Yeah, at this point. Well, talking about that in terms of being a queer person of color in a creative field, what are some of the challenges? And I actually was going to mention this to Nahnatchka in terms of being Asian American. Actually, coming from Detroit, we include Arab Americans as Asian Americans. So if you want to call yourself Asian American, you're welcome to be Asian American.
Thank you.
So do you guys have any thoughts on that in terms of the challenges of that dual minority?
I mean, I think that we talked about this a little bit before, but when we knew we got a first season pickup, we were going to be mid-season, so we were only going to get to do 13 episodes. Like I said, from the pilot, I knew that Oscar Chow existed, and that was always something that I knew was going to happen. One of those 13 is going to be, dedicated to Oscar, and having a gay character come into their lives, and in a different way, in an unexpected way, and what I'm really proud of that the writers and I did, and David Smithyman, who wrote this episode, is very talented. We did a love triangle between Jessica Lewis and Oscar that I don't think you've seen before, where it's not about them judging him for being gay, it's about, oh my God, which one of us dated him? I thought I was dating him, and then he thought he was dating him, the sort of typical romantic comedy love triangle, but with a spin on it. And to me, that kind of honors the characters, you know what I mean? We didn't want to do another story that you'd seen, or another version of sort of, the story that you've typically seen in a lot of, more white-oriented shows, or whatever you want to say. And we were really excited, So it's just a matter of deciding, of making it a priority and saying, okay, I'm going to dedicate an episode to this because it's important.
Any other thoughts on that? Of course.
Well, I was just going to say that, in terms of being in the audience as a queer person of color, you're always looking, just being in the audience, you just look to see yourself. And for a lot of us, we don't see ourselves visible in media, and I remember 20 years ago, we had this huge party to watch Ellen come out on TV, and it was a really big deal, but she's still a white lesbian, right? And then, a couple months ago, we had a huge party waiting to watch Fresh Off the Boat. It was oh, Asian Americans on TV, And so the fact that there's even this kind of a response to see one queer Asian American character on one TV show is a testament to the fact that we want to see ourselves on TV and in the media. And sometimes, for me as a cultural producer, I realize we just have to do the shit ourselves and like go out and make queer films or go out and make films that represent like who we are. So because people aren't exactly writing roles that way or aren't actually like representing that. So, I think that there's a way that we're sort of come a long way that like at this moment, maybe a handful of like gay Asian characters in the media, like 5. There's 5.
Actually, Perry Shen, who plays one of them, is in the audience.
Yeah.
He plays Brad on General Hospital.
Yeah. And
There's a Days of Our Lives gay storyline. Anyone watching that? No? Paul Narita, the like closeted baseball player, he's hot butt. It's really exciting. I'm watching Days of Our Lives.
I'm a GH fan. Sorry about that. I'll ask one last question before we open up the floor to questions. Get your questions ready, but it refers to something that you just mentioned in terms of how far we've come. I know a lot of people in the media have talked about what a breakthrough year this was in terms of shows by people of color, starring people of color, et cetera. Empire, How to Get Away with Murder, and Fresh Off the Boat. They've all been, listed together as this breakthrough year. But at the same time, there was this article, I don't know if people saw it in Deadline, which people...
I guess everybody saw it.
Yeah, okay. Any thoughts on camera?
I mean, listen. What are you even going to say? I mean, it's so crazy. It's so ludicrous. I mean, I think that there was one thing in there, I don't know if it was in the title or something, but the question was put like, has the pendulum swung too far in the other direction? And to me, it's like, we talked about this, but like, if to have the pendulum swing too far in the other direction, that implies that it's already been swinging. Like it's been static for 50 years, and now that we finally got some momentum and some, faces that are not white in front of the cameras and behind, how could that be a bad thing? How could that be even thought of for 1 second as not great? And it's certainly, I mean, it's just so crazy. I thought Shonda Rhimes had the best response on Twitter. She was just like, hold my earrings, and then
I think that's the appropriate response. At this point, we'll open up the floor to questions from the audience. Anybody have any questions for any of the panelists?
Hi, my name is Chris Villanueva. I'm with Daniel Magazine. I have a question for Nahnatchka about writing in general in Hollywood. I know for the Asian community, we've always been trying to fight for at least, get casted or at least be put on the screen without having like stereotypical looks like, oh, we want a ninja, so let's go call it Asian, or we want a very like Oriental kind of look, so let's go call it Asian, and we're breaking that now, and that's great to kind of see Asian Americans in different lights, in that diverse kind of look. I have a question a little bit about the LGBT circle now that the LGBT community is starting to find itself more on the screen as well and being brought on television as well. Is that conversation even happening in regards to diversifying how LGBT communities are being perceived and being presented? Or do we kind of move towards, okay, we're gonna go gay, so we're gonna do it as stereotypical gay as we can? And I'm not saying that it's not okay for it, because that's part of the spectrum, and I think it's well represented here because there's a point to it, right? For that you can see, but also is there conversation that, hey, let's diversify this community as well, let's present this community in a different light as well, so that maybe the other portion of the spectrum or other portions of the community is also represented. Is that conversation even happening within the writing tables?
I mean, I think it depends on, what show you're talking about and what character specifically, but like I said, I think that the way to make sure those things happen and those characters are, exist is to make sure that you're committed to making those characters exist. When you're a writer, when you're behind the camera and you have a chance to put a show on the air and tell some stories that haven't been told before through a lens that people haven't seen before, you have to make it a priority and decide what's important to you. And I think, a lot of shows, each individual show has to decide for themselves, like what's their priority, and I can only speak for myself, and Mine is, you know, to get all different kinds of people out there and to show all different kinds of families too. You know, you have the Wongs, and then you also have this little family between Oscar and Jessica and Lewis. You know, they have this shared history. They've known each other for 20 years since college. And that was also important, you know, that they've been in each other's lives for so long. And there's never any judgment, you know, they never have a problem with Oscar being gay. It's literally that they didn't know. And, you know, that Jessica didn't know. And it's a reflection on her character, you know. So it's, again, making a commitment to not doing the same kinds of stories you've seen, or, you know, typically, you know, characters that you've seen represented in typical ways. And, you know, I hope other shows decide to do the same, you know.
I had a question more about the grandma. Was there a thought from the beginning why she's a disabled person, or like in terms of being in a wheelchair? Is it something she was born with, or is it something that because she's elderly? I love that she's very authentic. I speak Mandarin, so I really appreciate that. That slice. I'm obviously plugging for my ethnicity. So why is she always like? I like her role. Is there a way to expand, or is it just, I know timing is short, but she rocks it, and I think showcasing her,
she's amazing.
It's just laughs in a barrel. So
I'm actually, the next episode written by Ali Wong, she's grandma's very prominent. She comes in and out of the storyline without giving anything away. The wheelchair question, I mean, that was from, you know, we wanted to keep that from Eddie's memoir. You know, his grandmother was in a wheelchair, and we referenced it, I think, in episode 2. In real life, his grandmother was in a wheelchair because, you know, her feet were bound when she was young. And we referenced it in a, you know, she does it in a joke in our show where, you know, Jessica's complaining that she misses her friends, and she's like, oh, is the princess lonely? She's like, my feet were bound when I was 7. So she's throwing a lot of shade at Jessica's, you know, first world complaints. But, you know, it was important to keep that. And for me, it was important to keep the multi-generational aspect in the home, because, like, I grew up, you know, my grandmother lived with us, my grandfather lived with us before he passed away. And it's just something that I know. You know, it's not out of the norm to have your grandmother, your grandfather living with you. And I think maybe for white families, that's a little more rare or something, but it was just sort of, you know, that's what happened. That's what we did, so.
I know this was supposed to be the gay Asian episode, and I certainly applauded. I thought it was hilarious. But on behalf of the emasculated, heterosexual Asian American male all across the country, thank you for having a joke in there about Lewis having oversized equipment. We really appreciate that. Break those stereotypes.
Like I said, you just have to be committed to the message, you know?
Anybody else with a big bone who wants to ask a question?
I don't have big bones, but you know, on the Facebook post, somebody had posted your audience who's really watching Fresh Off the Boat, and it didn't seem to be the Asian Americans that were, you know, the largest audience watching. I think it was the African American population. Do you have any thoughts or insights as to why that is?
I think, Jeff, that was you that posted that, right?
What do you think, Jeff?
I mean, do you want to answer? I mean, you did all the research. Here.
There you go. I think that it's interesting because there have been some controversies around it, obviously, because it's a show that does pick up on obviously a lot of African American cultural tropes. You know, Eddie in real life, obviously, and little Eddie are both enamored of hip hop and so forth. And you know, early on, there was of course the interaction between him and Walter, which was seen by some people as like, oh my God, you're putting, you know, this terrible slur in the mouth of an African American kid. But I think as time has gone on, people have really, you know, across the board, beyond the Asian American community, non-Hispanic white, and I have to use the term non-Hispanic white because that's like the census term. It's like kind of nonsensical in some ways. Like, you know, if you're Hispanic, come on, you're not white. It's like, but non-Hispanic white, African American, Hispanic, the full gamut of you know, and Native American of cultures have really been posting and saying that they actually kind of connect with the show and find it very relatable. African Americans, though, it's been really fascinating. There's been a ton of support, and from places that, you know, you almost wouldn't expect, like NFL quarterbacks and the Seahawks. The wide receiver?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doug Baldwin Jr.
Who is part Filipino on his grandmother's, I think his maternal grandmother's side. Either way, what they're saying though is that they feel like they have a connection, with the show and how the show is representing that something that began as an African American cultural thing has become the language of youth, especially seeking independence and seeking a voice. And that's kind of an amazing thing. And plus, it's just damn funny, right? So that's what I would say. Notch, would you have any additional thoughts around that?
Yeah, and I would say that, and I would also say that, I think that so much of Eddie's experience in the show is very universal in terms of this little kid relating to hip hop, feeling like he doesn't belong in his own family, his mom not even, understanding the way he dresses or the music he listens to. And I think that sort of feeling of being an outsider transcends race a lot of times, because I think everybody feels like that. And I think especially within their own family, and I would say that the music and the feeling of an outsider within your own family and your own community, I think it's funny. But I think those are elements that, people are drawn to because you just don't see it. It just doesn't exist in other shows that much. And so I think it goes to, what everyone's sort of saying about like the hunger to see representation, whatever that might look like. It doesn't have to actually look exactly like how you look or your, this experience be exactly your experience to feel like you have an access point, and to feel like you can connect, so.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that? So with people of color, oftentimes we have this thing called code talk, right? Like when you're with other people of color, you talk one way, and when you're with majority white people, you talk another way, right? Does that come into your thinking in terms of the way you write the show? Like, is there a particular audience that you're trying to speak to?
No, in the writer's room, we have so many different backgrounds that are represented and Sanjay, who's here, is one of the writers, he and I were talking before about how really it's the first time that there's a shorthand, though, there is a shorthand that, we have an experience working on other people's shows that are mostly white staff and, mostly white male showrunners. And it doesn't mean that, it's just different, like we can, like Sanjay wrote the episode about, Eddie wanting to have a sleepover. And we just weren't allowed to have sleepovers. Like that's just not a thing. And like we understood that, and I feel like in a white room they'd have to be like, what do you mean? Sleepover. The kid has a sleepover, and you'd be like, no, well, she doesn't trust pedophiles. And they'd be like, what? So, the fact that you don't have to explain a lot, that there is just that sort of understanding at a base level, is something that is very cool. That we could just, get each other.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Another question from the audience?
I live down in Irvine where there's a lot of suburban Asians, so kind of like what Fresh Off the Boat represents, that kind of suburban Asian families. And it seems like there's not a lot of people that really watch it down there. I've seen a lot more of my Hispanic and African American friends actually watch it than some of my suburban Asian friends. So do you think that that feeling of being an outsider to the rest of the white society really kind of is a factor in why a lot of African Americans watch it over Asian Americans, especially the ones that have kind of assimilated?
It's very possible. That's interesting. Where did you say you lived that was suburban? Irvine. I didn't really know, it's interesting that sort of the more suburban Asians aren't watching, I have no idea. Maybe they don't feel like they don't need to watch or they're not into it. I'm not really sure. It's interesting though.
Up there. Steps. Where's your foot?
While she's running, Jeff, do you have any stats on where the show is most popular, like geographically? Were you able to find anything like that?
Yeah, it does very well in top 25 markets. New York, for some reason, it's very, very popular. But as you might expect, it's got a big, very strong urban following. I think it's actually indexes much higher in cities as opposed to suburbs and like.
But not necessarily like West Coast and Hawaii versus say Atlanta.
I don't have it broken out by region per se.
You got to spread the word in Irvine, though.
Yeah, what up with that?
You got to start like pounding on those doors.
It's interesting. This actually goes back to your earlier question about whether people feel an obligation to support their own community, and not talking about any of you, but I think a lot of Asian people don't feel an obligation. I'm shocked that the most critical comments I've heard about this show are from Asian people. And, you know, I would say that over the course of my career, I've always sort of respected how African Americans will support, you know, other African American artists, even when they're not good. And, yeah, so I didn't promise you 100% positivity, but anyway. But I have respect for that. And I have not ever really noticed that in the Asian community, and I've always wondered why that is. Anyway, so I guess I've been asking a question instead of answering one. But now you have arrived at the person who gets a mic.
So yeah, speaking to that point, actually, you know, I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio, and I grew up in a very white community. And as an Asian American growing up there, I really did feel a lot of the things or experience a lot of things that Eddie did, and I, you know, find it very relatable. But I guess if you're brought up in a community that is predominantly Asian, like a lot of the, you know, enclaves around here, it might be almost harder in some ways to identify because you don't know what it's like growing up being someone who is of a different race because you're in this predominantly Asian American community. So yeah, that's just like a remark I wanted to make. But my question is, so the way the character was portrayed on the show, I guess, and this is speaking to the someone's question over there, I guess to me seemed, you know, maybe a bit stereotypically gay, and I'm just wondering what made you decide to make the character portrayed in that particular way. I mean, not speaking to like the, you know, love triangle, but just the way the character himself was.
I mean, you can, but for me, you know, and for the writers, we specifically wanted Oscar to be very comfortable with who he is and there to be no question that he's gay, because that speaks to the Jessica story. Because if it's ambiguous or it's like he's not, you know, you're not sure and he's sort of, you know, cagey or coy at all, her story doesn't really work. You know, like it's got to be, he is who he is, this is him as a gay man, he's comfortable in who he is, and it's on her. It's like Jessica, you know, then you have that whole gaydar, when her gaydar finally comes back online, and it's like right in front of, you know, it's just been there the whole time. So I think that was the decision. You know, he's literally been wearing a Gaysian necklace the entire time. So, I mean, you need that sort of obviousness to play for her, you know, character.
But I think we read, you know, in Rex's character that his sort of like trying to figure out whether or not, you know, he and Lewis were together and dating also, you know, because Lewis reads as masculine because he's so big boned, and, you know, that you get to sort of blur that line of sort of gender and like the sort of performance of gender. And so, and I think also for a lot of us, maybe queers in the 90s thing, you know, you're always like, is this a date? I don't know if it's a date. Like we shared dessert, like they paid for the taxi. I don't know, it could be a date. I mean, like not knowing like your whole life whether anyone was gay or not, you know, like because there were obvious signs or there were like little weird like winks or nods, or you're like, oh, they had like a rainbow earring. I think maybe they were gay, right? So like
in the 90s, I think people were gay for everybody was gay for at least 3 minutes.
Yeah,
that's what made everything so confusing.
Yeah, because like they hang out with you when they were drunk, and then like Monday came, you're like, oh, maybe she's not gay. Okay, we had fun though.
It happened in college.
Yeah,
that's a sexual orientation in and of itself.
And I think I just want to address in general the idea of playing gay in the first place. I am a gay man in real life. No. Why was that funny? Anyway, and maybe
she
as
no, that was
and maybe as a gay man, I approach acting a gay character different from a straight actor. I understand that what makes me gay is not, you know, what I do with my hands or my voice. I understand that I'm gay because I fall in love with men, and yes, a byproduct of that is I want to have sex with them. but therefore, if I'm playing a gay character, in my backstory, I know that what it means to be gay is this, not that. So when I'm playing a gay character, I'm not really thinking too much about what I'm doing with my hands and my voice.
Right.
I just want to point that out.
And also props for having gay people playing gay people.
Question up here. That's the next deadline article. It's like straights playing gay all the time.
You know what? I want to play a straight person.
Yeah.
So bad.
Bring it.
You know what I'm saying? Put me in the role. And I want to play white. White face.
So very exciting for me right now, fangirling right now. So my question's kind of different. So I probably have the same bottle of white flour that survived the Northwoods earthquake in my parents' house. And I appreciate having that reference. How do you decide how to put these like references, cultural markers, inside jokes into the story?
I mean, they come naturally, you know, they're from our writer's room, from Melvin, our exec producer, who is very much a white flour oil child. You know, because we know that, you know, like in my family and a lot of the writers' families, like, you don't go to the doctor right away. Like, you have to almost be dying to go to the doctor. And there's all these homemade shit that comes out, and you're like, where is this from? You know, and it's like
bean sprout juice.
Yeah.
My mom made me do shots of bean sprout juice.
Yeah.
That doesn't fix anything.
It doesn't make anything. My mom would like burn seeds and like put the smoke around me. You know, and I'm like, you're not even touching me. Like, this is not even physically touching me. So we wanted to play that. You know, we don't want to just run off to the doctor because that's not authentic. You know, so. And it made us laugh. We were like, yes, the mom for sure brings out white flour oil.
So I have a similar background to the young lady who's from Cincinnati, Ohio, but it also mirrors Eddie Huang's journey, because when I was 14, I moved from Sunnyvale, California, which is the heart of Silicon Valley, tons of Chinese students, to Cleveland Heights, Ohio. And there were no Chinese or Asian kids. There was one other family. But my school was split down the middle, half black, half white. And I didn't have, what was that?
And then the two Asians.
And the two Asians, which I didn't even realize until senior year they were there. But I got, just like Eddie, from both ends. The ignorance from the white people who asked me when I walked in classrooms if I spoke English, to the blacks that made me, just like the pilot, the scapegoat, you know, doing Ching Chong talk to me. And I'm like, and what my point is, there was nothing funny about that. Absolutely nothing funny about that to me. But you have taken, your writers, and this is the question I have for it, have taken that, and Eddie did too, Eddie Huang in his original memoir, to bring the humor in it. But now that the show's run several episodes, we see, and through Jeff's graphic, that it's hitting a lot of other groups. So there's universality about the humor. And I wanted to ask Nahnatchka and her writers because there are plenty of jokes that are Chinese specific and race specific, but the theme of the universal part, like you were saying about wanting to belong, do you and your writers consciously have, in all the episodes that you wrote, said, let's make this the universal jokes, because we can't just make it the specific? Is there a balance that goes on in the writer's room where we're making something universal? Because my story, I thought I was the only one that ever happened to. And to move there, and it wasn't funny, but you made it funny. But I want to ask about that balance you do in the writing room.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that there's a conscious, we don't have like a tally of these kinds of jokes versus these kinds of jokes, but I think that in the stories and in the characters, you want to give audiences something to hold on to. When you're telling a certain story, you want to understand why Jessica's doing what she's doing. Like, to me, that's where comedy works best. When people start to get untethered and act crazy and you don't know why they're doing what they're doing, that's when I check out, like me personally. So it's very important to us to keep everybody grounded in their own reality. So Constance, as Jessica, can do something crazy like run over Dine & Dashers with her car, but you're with her, And so I think that's where the universality comes from, because everybody knows what it feels like to feel somehow, wronged like in that specific instance or something like that, you know, and then we get the jokes that are more specific to the families, like we just said, like white flour oil and things like that. But the broad stuff, you know, has to be relatable to the characters in a human sense, you know, where it's like, Louis wants the restaurant to succeed. Why? Because he told his family that it was a success. He misrepresented the success, and now there's no room for failure. He took them here, and he's got to do everything he can to make this work. And I think that's something everybody can relate to. You know, you want to succeed at whatever your profession is. You know, Jessica wants to do her, you know, be successful in her way, and so does Eddie, and so do the younger boys. And I think that's really why you see it sort of connecting on a lot of different levels with a lot of different people, because of that sort of humanness of it. And the inclusion, you know? We're not saying like, if you're not from an immigrant family, you shouldn't watch this show, or if you're not Asian, you shouldn't watch this show, or if you're not gay, you shouldn't watch this episode. We're saying you should watch all these things. You know, there's always gonna be something for you in this show if you've ever felt like an outsider. And there's all kinds of access points, and that's something that we always keep coming back to. It's the inclusiveness of our comedy, you know, rather than exclusionary.
Great. So before we wrap up, I just have one last question. In the audience, we have a lot of community leaders and community activists here, and I can bet that we all want the show to come back for a second season. Is that right? What can people here do to sort of help, or do you feel?
Man, I mean, you know, I think the best thing is to like DVR. I hope everyone's DVR is set when you go home, and like just
especially in
watch it.
Irvine.
Yeah, Irvine. You know, I think supporting it on social media, tweeting, you know, Facebook, and just DVRing, watching that same night if you can. If not, the next best thing is to watch within 3 days, because those are the advertisers that they look at those numbers. And we only have 3 more episodes left, so our finale is on the 21st of April. So for these next 3 weeks, just do whatever you can, and you know, we should know probably the beginning of May, I would guess.
Awesome. I assigned it for homework.
I'm psychic, and I believe that we're gonna get a season 2. Or psycho.
Well, so thank you to the panelists. Okay, I'll start this way. For Erin, D-Lo, Rex, and Nahnatchka. We're just thanking you all. Thank you, everybody.
Curtis, can I make a quick plug real quick? Can I make a quick plug?
Yes.
I have my solo show that is going up, and it's a stand-up storytelling show. It's if you like John Leguizamo, it's very much like that high school kind of. If you like D-Lo, go see it. Yeah, if you don't know me, know me.
Now. Well, I heard it was better than looking.
It's just. But anyway, nobody heard that, right? Okay. So anyway, so I hope you all come and join me. It's running for 3 weekends at the LGBT Center. They have a larger theater. I'm in the small black box, and it's a small theater, so I'm encouraging people to get tickets. We've already sold out this Friday's opening night. Saturday and Sunday, we're almost close to selling out. So please come out and check it. I got flyers. And y'all are gonna have the best time. You can hear about my experiences growing up in Sri Lancaster, California. and like trying to stay away from the KKK and you know, all those wonderful things that happen in Lancaster, California.
Great. Thank you. And thank you to Jeff and Jenny and Phil. They've got their
Thank you. So let's all thank Curtis, actually, for his turn for moderating. Before you go, one last thing. 2 things. So yes, the Who's, Tommy, hopefully you can grab this at East West Player. Let's support live Asian American art. Also, Phil and I right now are going to head over to our secret studio. And
it's a lair.
It's a lair, and we're going to shoot fresh off the show. If you haven't heard, now you know. We do an online streaming, live streaming post-show, and luckily we're going to have 2 very great guests that are going to come with us over to fresh off the show. So in 5 minutes, go online. Phil has posted the link on his Twitter and blog, or repsweats.com. I know, I just spent $10 and bought that. So if you go to repsweats.com, it'll redirect you to this event page, to our event page, and it'll have the YouTube link, okay? So come talk to us about the show more in depth online. So we'll see you in about 5 minutes online. But otherwise, have a great night.